to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. Tonight you'll drift into a cozy evening at Tulip Lane Bed and Breakfast, where lamplight glows in curtained windows, warm tea steams in a quiet parlor, and tulips rest like soft promises along a moonlit garden path. Take a slow breath in through your nose and let it out gently. Let your shoulders loosen as if a careful hand has unfastened a small knot you didn't know you were holding. Let your jaw soften. Let your tongue rest. Let the space behind your eyes grow smooth and quiet. So imagine you are arriving at the end of a day that has done enough. You don't need to solve anything anymore. You don't need to plan or measure or perform. You only need to arrive and be received. In your mind, there is a lane lined with old trees, the kind that lift their branches like welcoming arches. The air is cool but kind, with a hint of damp earth and something sweet. Maybe the last breath of spring, maybe the scent of flowers folded for the night. Your steps are unhurried. The gravel underfoot makes a soft, friendly sound, a small crunch, like a whisper. At the end of the lane sits a house that seems to glow from within. Not bright, not sharp. Just a steady warmth behind window panes. A porch light hums like a firefly caught in a lantern. Curtains rest in gentle folds, and in one upstairs window, a lamp is shaded in pale amber, turning the room behind it into honey. As you picture it, let your breathing slow again. In and out. In and out. You can almost feel the weight of a coat sliding from your shoulders. You can almost hear the quiet click of a latch. You can almost taste the first sip of something warm. And while you rest here at the threshold of the story, allow the world you've been carrying to set itself down beside you, not thrown away, not abandoned, just placed gently on the floor where it can wait until morning without needing your attention. Now, when you're ready, let the story begin. As if it is happening somewhere just beyond your eyelids, soft and steady, like a lullaby made of light. The sign at the entrance of Tulip Lane Bed and Breakfast swung a little in the evening breeze. It was painted an old-fashioned shade of green, with pale lettering that looked as though it had been written by hand. Beneath the name was a simple illustration of 3 tulips, their petals open as if they were listening. Inside the house, everything spoke in quiet tones. The foyer smelled faintly of beeswax and cedar. A rug lay across the wooden floor, thick enough to soften footsteps and patterned in muted florals. Blush, cream, faded blue, colors that seemed to have been warmed by sunlight over many seasons. A coat stand stood patiently by the door, and a small table held a bowl of polished stones smooth as river pebbles, arranged in a way that felt thoughtful rather than showy. A woman stepped into view from an adjoining room. She had silver hair gathered at the nape of her neck, and her cardigan looked like it had always belonged to her, as if it had formed around her like a gentle shell. She smiled with an ease that made the whole house seem to exhale. "Welcome," she said softly, as though she were speaking to someone already half asleep. "You must be here for a night or two." Her name was Maribel, and she was the keeper of Tulip Lane. She didn't ask many questions. She didn't hurry. She simply took a small leather-bound book from a drawer, found a page, and made a tidy note with a fountain pen that gleamed like a drop of ink. Then she offered a warm cloth, lightly scented with lavender, for travel-worn hands. "Tea is in the parlor," she said. "Or cocoa, if you prefer. The fire has been waiting." A fireplace murmured with flame. No. A fireplace murmured with flame. No crackling drama, only a steady, contented sound. The chairs looked like they had been chosen for comfort rather than style, and yet everything was lovely. The way the pillows were plumped, the way the books were stacked, the way a small vase of tulips sat on the mantelpiece as if it belonged to the room's heartbeat. Outside the tall windows, the garden lay in a hush. It was late enough that the tulip beds were only shapes and shadows, but the moonlight made their leaves gleam, and the lane beyond the garden gate looked like a ribbon of pale stone. Maribel poured tea from a pot that was warmed by a knitted cozy. The cup she offered was slightly heavy in the hand, the kind that made you slow down without trying. Steam rose in a quiet spiral, and the scent was chamomile with a hint of citrus peel. Across from the fireplace, a man sat with a book open on his lap. He had the calm posture of someone who had nowhere else to be. When Maribel set down the teacup, he looked up with a gentle nod. "That's Edwin," Maribel said, as if introducing a familiar song. "He's been with us for a week. Writer, gardener, listener. He does all three equally well." Edwin smiled in agreement, neither eager nor distant. His eyes were kind in the way that suggested he noticed small things. Dust motes in lamplight, the sigh of a settling house, the way a teacup warmed the palms. Another guest stood near a bookshelf, running her fingers lightly across the spines without pulling anything out. She was younger than Edwin, with hair the color of autumn wheat, and a shawl draped around her shoulders. Her name was Lark, and she'd come to Tulip Lane for quiet after a busy season of traveling. And so the evening arranged itself. It did not announce itself with fanfare, it simply became. Tea was sipped, the fire glowed, pages were turned, the house creaked softly in the way that older homes do, like a gentle clearing of the throat, a reminder that the building was alive in its own slow rhythm. Maribel moved through the parlor like someone tending a small invisible garden. She adjusted a lamp so the light fell more kindly. She set a plate of butter cookies on a low table without comment. She added another log to the fire when the flames began to soften. At a certain point, she stepped to the window and drew back the curtain just a little. The glass caught the reflection of the room, firelight and faces, warmth and stillness, and beyond it the garden lay still, silvered by the moon. "It's a good night to walk the lane," she said, more to the room than to anyone in particular. "If you like, the air is gentle." Edwin closed his book with a quiet thump that sounded like a soft decision. Lark turned from the shelf and nodded, her expression brightening in a calm, contained way. They all rose slowly, as if the act of standing itself could be done with care. Maribel handed out lanterns, not the harsh kind, but small ones with frosted panels that made their light diffuse and tender. The lanterns were not necessary, really. The moon was generous, but they felt like part of the ritual, like carrying a small pocket of warmth into the night. The front door opened with a sigh, and the evening air slipped in. Coolness brushed cheeks and hands, and the scent of damp earth grew clearer. Somewhere unseen, an owl made a single sound, not haunting but steady, like a note struck and held. Tulip Lane itself was a narrow path of stone bordered by low hedges and flower beds. Even at night, the tulips were present, their stems and leaves rising like quiet guardians. In the moonlight, they were less about color and more about shape, cups and curves and gentle silhouettes. As they walked, the lantern light moved across the ground in slow arcs. Shadows shifted, leaves glimmered. The house behind them remained a warm square of light, as if it would not mind waiting. The lane led to a small archway made of climbing vines. In the day, it would be heavy with blooms, but at night it was simply a dark outline against the sky. Passing beneath it felt like stepping into a softer world, one where everything moved more slowly and listened more carefully. Beyond the archway, the garden opened into a wider space. A fountain sat at its center, not grand but elegant in a simple way. Water trickled from a small stone bowl into another, the sound like a continuous whisper. The air near the fountain was cooler, and the scent of wet stone mixed with the faint sweetness of flowers. Edwin paused to hold his lantern closer, studying something at the edge of the fountain basin. A small snail moved there, slow and purposeful, its shell reflecting the lantern's glow like a tiny polished moon. "There's something comforting about creatures who don't rush," Lark murmured. Edwin nodded. "They always arrive. It just takes the time it takes." Maribel smiled at them both, and her gaze lifted toward the trees. Their branches made a delicate lace against the night sky. In that lace, a few stars peeked through, trembling in and out of sight as leaves swayed. "Come," Maribel said. "There's something I like to show guests, if they want to see it." She led them along a narrower path that curved behind a row of shrubs. The lantern light brushed the edges of leaves, turning them momentarily into glowing shapes. The path was slightly uneven, but the stones were set in such a way that feet could find them easily, as if the lane itself wanted to guide rather than challenge. They came to a small greenhouse. It was not large, but it was charming. made of old glass panes held in white painted frames. The glass was fogged from the warmth inside, and droplets clung to it like tiny pearls. A single light burned within, golden and soft. Maribel opened the door, and warm air sighed outward, carrying the scent of damp soil and green leaves. The air inside was humid in a gentle way, like breathing near a quiet stream. On shelves and tables, pots held herbs and seedlings. There were delicate vines curling upward and small labels written in careful handwriting. But most of all, there were tulips, some in pots, some in trays, some in stages of blooming that seemed impossible for the season. Lark's eyes widened slightly. How? Maribel lifted one shoulder in a small, modest shrug. A greenhouse helps, and patience, and perhaps a little listening. Edwin stepped closer to a cluster of tulips with pale petals that seemed to glow from within. Their color was not quite white, not quite cream, something like moonlight caught and softened. "They're beautiful," he said quietly. Maribel moved among the plants, touching leaves as though greeting old friends. She stopped beside a table where a shallow bowl of water sat with smooth stones at the bottom. Floating on the surface were tiny blossoms, just a few petals each, like little boats. "I set these here sometimes," she said, "for the sound. If you sit and listen long enough, the water tells you what kind of night it is." Lark leaned in, listening. At first, she heard only the soft trickle of condensation falling from a glass pane, the faint movement of leaves. But then she heard something else, an almost musical quietness, the kind of stillness that felt full rather than empty. Edwin sat on a small bench near the doorway, his lantern placed carefully at his feet. He closed his eyes briefly, not to sleep, but to rest in the sound. In the greenhouse, time did not feel like a line. It felt like a pool, something you could sit beside and watch shimmer. After a while, Maribel poured water from a small kettle into a pot, where an herb grew in a neat cluster. The soil darkened and drank it in. "This place is not only for plants," Maribel said softly. "It's for people too. People are like gardens. They need warmth and water and a little light. They need quiet. They need nights where nothing is asked of them." Lark's shoulders dropped in a slow release, as if she had been holding herself up for longer than she realized. Edwin opened his eyes and looked at the tulips again, their petals calm and steady. Outside, the night held on, unhurried. When they left the greenhouse, the air felt cooler again, but not harsh. The lane seemed even quieter now, as if the garden had absorbed their footsteps and softened them. They walked back toward the house, lanterns swinging slightly. The fountain's whisper faded behind them. The trees stood tall and still. At the edge of the garden, Maribel paused beside a tulip bed and knelt. She touched the soil gently with her fingertips, as though checking a child's forehead. "Rest well," she whispered, not to the tulips alone, but to the night itself. Back inside, the parlor welcomed them like an embrace. The fire had settled into a bed of glowing coals. The lamps still hummed softly. The cookies remained on the table, patient and sweet. Maribel refilled the teapot. Edwin poured a little milk into his cup. Lark chose cocoa, and Maribel brought it with a sprinkle of cinnamon on top, the scent rising like comfort. They spoke quietly, but not of anything heavy. Edwin mentioned the way the greenhouse glass had been beaded with droplets like tiny stars. Lark spoke of the fountain and how the water sounded like someone telling a secret. Maribel listened, nodding, as if these observations mattered deeply. Because they did. At Tulip Lane, noticing was a kind of ceremony. Later, when the clock in the hallway chimed softly, its sound rounded and gentle, not startling. Maribel rose. "It's about time for rooms," she said. "The house likes to sleep when its guests do." She led them up the stairs, which curved with a slow elegance. The hallway upstairs was lined with framed prints of flowers and old maps. Each door had a small plaque with a name: Daisy Room, Lavender Room, Moonstone Room. The names felt like little poems. Lark's room was the Lavender Room. Inside, the bed was made with white linens and a quilt stitched in pale purple and green. A small vase of dried lavender sat on the windowsill, and when Lark touched it, the scent lifted gently into the air. There was a chair by the window, with a knitted throw over it, and a book left open on the bedside table as if it had been waiting. Edwin's room was the Moonstone Room. The walls were painted a soft gray blue. The lamp on the nightstand had a shade that glowed like fog. On the dresser was a small bowl of moonstones, smooth and cool to the touch, catching the lamplight in faint flashes. And then there was the room prepared for the newest guest. It was called the Tulip Room. The quilt on the bed was patterned with tulips, simple shapes, not too bright, as if they had been painted with watercolors and allowed to fade a little at the edges. The pillows were soft, piled like clouds. The window was slightly open, just enough to let in fresh air and the faint sound of the garden outside. On the bedside table sat a small note written in Maribel's careful script. "Rest comes easily here. Let it find you." Beside the note was a small bowl with a single tulip petal inside, velvety and curved, like a tiny piece of sunrise, saved for later. Maribel set a glass carafe of water on a tray and adjusted the lamp so its light was low. "If you need anything," she said, "you only have to listen. The house is very good at hearing quiet requests." And with that she left, closing the door softly. The Tulip Room held a particular kind of hush. The bed invited the body to let go, to loosen itself from the day. The air smelled faintly of clean linen and lavender, and something else, something like warm wood and distant rain. Outside the window, the garden rested. The tulips were still, their stems unwavering. The moon hung above the trees like a gentle guardian. In the house, small sounds moved like slow fish in a pond. The soft settling of beams, the distant tick of the hallway clock, the faint whisper of wind brushing leaves against glass. Downstairs, Maribel moved through the kitchen, preparing for morning with the same unhurried care she gave tonight. She kneaded dough quietly, letting it rise under a cloth, like a sleeping thing. She sliced oranges for marmalade, the scent bright but softened by the late hour. She set out cups and saucers, as if arranging a small, comforting constellation. Edwin sat at a table with a notebook open, writing a few lines before sleep. His pen moved slowly, not chasing ideas, simply letting them drift onto the page. He wrote about lantern light on stone, about the greenhouse warmth, about the way the tulips looked like listening cups turned upward to the sky. Lark stood on the porch with her shawl pulled around her shoulders, sipping the last of her cocoa. She watched the lane, now empty and quiet. She felt her breath slow, her thoughts becoming less insistent, more like soft clouds passing. Tulip Lane Bed and Breakfast did not demand anything from its guests. It simply offered a place to be held, a place where time widened, a place where the night was not something to hurry through, but something to settle into like a well-worn chair. As the house grew quieter, the warmth of the day's small comforts began to fold into dreams. In the tulip room, the bed seemed to rise to meet the body, supporting every curve. The quilt held its gentle weight, enough to be reassuring, not enough to press. Breath moved slowly, in and out. The mind, which had been busy with lists and edges and sharp corners, began to soften. Thoughts came, but they did not stay. They floated through like leaves on water. Somewhere outside, the fountain continued its whisper, though it was too far away to hear clearly. And yet the idea of it remained, the sense that water was always moving, always soothing, always telling the night what kind of night it was. And this was a night for rest. Maribel, before turning in, walked once more through the parlor. She banked the fire until it glowed like sleeping embers. She straightened a pillow and placed a folded blanket on the sofa just in case. She turned off one lamp, leaving another glowing softly, a small beacon in the quiet. Then she stood for a moment in the center of the room, listening. The house was full of gentle sounds, the hush of sleeping guests, the whisper of curtains, the slow breathing of wood and stone. Maribel smiled, satisfied, as if the house had told her everything she needed to know. Upstairs, Edwin's pen paused. He set it down and closed his notebook. He looked out his window at the moonlit garden, and for a moment he felt as if the tulips were tiny lanterns of their own, not lit by flame, but by quiet presence. He lay down and let his eyes close. Lark slipped into bed and pulled the quilt up to her chin. Her thoughts, which had been restless for days, began to settle like snowflakes falling onto a calm field. She drifted toward sleep without needing to chase it. In the tulip room, the note on the bedside table seemed to glow faintly in the lamp's low light. Rest comes easily here. Let it find you. And it did. It moved through the room like a soft mist, wrapping around the corners, filling the spaces, smoothing the air. It moved into the body, loosening muscles, warming the chest, easing the brow, The lane outside lay quiet under the moon, its stones pale and still. The trees held their branches overhead like protective arms. The tulips rested in their beds, petals closed or half open, dreaming in their own silent way. The whole place felt like it had been made for this gentle surrender tonight. And as the hours passed, everything grew softer still. The house became a cradle of quiet. The rooms became pockets of warmth. The garden became a moonlit lullaby. Breathing slowed, thoughts softened. The world became distant, like a shoreline seen from a boat drifting into calm water. Now the story begins to wind down, not with an ending that snaps shut, but with a quiet dimming, like a lamp turned low. Imagine the lanterns in the parlor, how their light does not fight the darkness but lives peacefully beside it. Imagine the quilt in the tulip room, how it rests across you like a gentle hand. Imagine the lane outside, still safe, waiting. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to hold anything up. Let your body become heavy in the bed. Let your breath become easy. Let your mind become quiet. If a thought arrives, let it pass like a petal floating across water. It doesn't need an answer. It doesn't need attention. It can drift on. The fountain whispers somewhere in the night. The tulips sleep in their beds. The house settles into stillness, and you too can settle. Deeper now, softer now. The day is done. The lane is quiet. The rooms are warm. The night is kind. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.